Welcome to episode 144 of the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined by Trell.
What up, Dratnos?
What up? And Tettles.
Yo, what's up? Welcome.
Welcome yourself as well. So we are back this week we've got a few different things to talk about. We've got some new talent trees. We've got some TGP stuff. And then we've got the Ian Max interview that has just concluded like a couple hours ago as the time of recording this, that we will dig into some of the meat from.
We are about to spoil the TGP America region, by the way. If you haven't watched it and for some reason don't want the results spoiled, we are about to spoil them.
Yes, yeah, that's...
I haven't watched it yet. Maybe I should turn this off. I'm just kidding.
Ah, yes, of course.
Oh, were you not watching? That would explain some of those polls.
Listen here, Dratnos. Yeah, you got me.
I gotta go, Drass. There's been a murder on the podcast.
So yeah, TGP just wrapped up. Trell, you were of course competing. How did it go for you? Did you have a fun time? And how did your team do?
I mean, it was a ton of fun playing in a tournament for the first time in I think 2 years or something like that. The last time I tried to do MDI was when my appendix ruptured, like just over 2 years ago. Maybe that was a year and a half ago. Man, it's hard to tell these days. During COVID. But it was a lot of fun. Corey and Cry on my team have done MDI with me before, so that was like a returning core of the group. And then we had two of my guildies, Kel and Toll, that played with us. And that was their first competition with WoW ever. And so I'm proud of everyone for how they did. I think we could have done a little bit better. And in hindsight, it's easy to see what we could have done, but I think everyone played pretty well. It's a good time.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed to see the NA teams, I think, stepping up, because a lot of people were talking about it being like a 2-horse race from the time trials. And to be fair, those two teams did end up getting first and second, but the other teams all also, including yours, margin. Were like, you guys were playing, the same key levels or the same key level -1, or in some dungeons even slightly better for a lot of the weekend. So I thought it was
yeah, man, our lower Kara was good. I think we had probably the best lower Kara overall, and maybe the best junkyard overall too, except for the 35. I think Ambition did the last boss one phase better than us, but I think we suffered a lot, and especially the time trial dungeons. And a big reason for that was because we thought for sure they wouldn't put them in the tournament, so we kind of sandbagged preparation for those and stopped at 29s in the time trials. And then we also didn't walk back into those dungeons at all until we found out that they were actually in the tournament. So that was pretty unfortunate, but
brutal, yeah.
Yeah, some of our dungeons were good for sure.
Yeah, the junkyard on the last day as well was definitely interesting. Sprint to plus 35 on that one. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of us, if you'd asked us what was going to happen with junkyard going into it, we would have been like, yeah, that's going up to the, as high as it'll go. But I think there were some people that didn't really believe it until they saw it. And then it's just like, oh yeah, this keystone is actually just infinitely more timeable at any given key level than any other dungeon. It was being three-chested at 29.
Oh yeah.
Which is
it's nuts how easy like 35 junkyard was compared to 29 lower Kara. It's just so much easier.
I mean, we're gonna talk about that in just a second too, like all of the narrative stuff about TGP as well. I don't think we need to necessarily spoil it all, but congratulations, Trell. I thought you guys played quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we can go into it more later.
We also had another equally as impressive esports contestant on our show this week. That is me competing in the WoW Variety Show. Here was some footage of me while the rest of everybody was in Ratchet. I was still making my way to the boat using the innovative Seahorse mount technology during the foot race across Azeroth. This is my time to shine on the big stage.
So why were you on the Seahorse? Can you explain your thought process?
Well, okay, so here's the lore behind this. So the route was from the Orc starting location to Orgrimmar, Zeppelin to Gromgal and Stranglethorn Vale, walk down to Booty Bay, boat to Ratchet. But the Zeppelins from Orgrimmar to Gromgal were like gigabugged. Like 80% of the contestants couldn't see those Zeppelins because there were too many people on the shard, and so they just literally weren't spawning for anybody. So they were like, okay, we're going to pause at Ratchet, we're going to regroup, we'll get everybody there, and then we'll keep going. But So I was in the group that didn't see the Zeppelin for a while. I relogged and then I was able to see it. So I was behind where everybody else was, but they were kind of paused at Ratchet waiting for me and others to catch up. But I actually think my path was better from Gromgal to Booty Bay than a lot of people, because you could mount and run across in Stranglethorn Vale, or you could use the Seahorse mount and go down the aquatic coastline. Now, we won't get to actually see if that's faster or slower, because of course I was 5 minutes behind because of the Zeppelin thing, but I think it actually, had there not been any bugs interfering in my esports, I think I would have won the whole thing for sure. It would have been so cool. Yeah.
Same. I also would have won the whole tournament.
Yeah.
He just listed like 5 cities that I don't even know where they are. Something about a Gromgal, a Ratchet, and a Booty Bay, and I'm like, I don't know where any of these people are.
Gromgal and Booty Bay are both in Stranglethorn Vale. Gromgal's in northern Stranglethorn Vale, and Ratchet's in northern Barrens, and Booty Bay is in southern Stranglethorn Vale, or the Cape of Stranglethorn. Interestingly enough, Stranglethorn and the Barrens are both 2 zones that used to be 1 zone but got split in 2 in the Cataclysm, so that's another cool fun fact that you can put on your fun fact collection, giving these away for free now. So we also had the talent trees coming out for. Actually, Monk came out like last week when we were taking our week off for TGP. Yeah. A lot of cool stuff in here, especially for Brew in particular. You can get like 4,000 different strong defensive buttons on here.
I know,
which is pretty lit. Yeah. How are you feeling about the Monk trees in general, Trell?
I think they're awesome. I think a lot of people don't like the Windwalker tree, especially the long time Windwalker players, but I think it's really, really good, especially for single target. Maybe too much spinning crank kick stuff on the Windwalker. I think the general Monk tree is really, really nice for at least Windwalker and Brewmaster. I'm not sure about Mistweaver, but there's so many really good options you can take there, and like things to buff spinning crank kick, or even in the general tree, the 3 different statue choices are going to be pretty cool. I think the Windwalker and Brewmaster statues, especially being taken by either spec, is very, very good. And then the Brewmaster tree, I think there's so many powerful things that you kind of have to cut something big to get something that you want. In some cases, like right at the end of the tree. And so you're gonna have to, which is, I think it's a good thing. It's kind of frustrating thinking about that at first, but in the end, I think it'll be a really good thing for like literal meaningful choice, as they like to call it, for taking what you want to take for a dungeon.
Yeah, I think that most trees have had those decisions where it's like, oh, there is like significant friction in your tree, and you're like, these are core things that I would really like a lot of them, and then it's just like you have to make a decision on normally like 2 out of the 3. It normally ends up being like 2 out of the 3 of the really meaningful choices that you want.
I think one thing that's really good about the Brewmaster tree specifically too is that it gives so much AoE damage to spinning crank kick, which is really, really nice quality of life for a threat. So threat is probably not going to be a problem for Brew anymore.
Actually, what I think that they should do is for every single tank, they should put a node in the middle of the tree that it's a 3-point node, and you're able to put it increases your threat by 100, 200, and 300% whenever you put points into it.
You could like drop it as you get with a more coordinated group.
But they should also just nerf threat coming into the expansion.
I see. Yeah.
Oh, never mind. No. Stop that.
Yeah, Tettle started that in a way that sounded like he was just trying to troll, and then it was like, actually, that's an interesting idea that is not worth just throwing out immediately, and so he had to just make it even worse. Yeah, I like the Monk tree seems so like getting dampen and diffuse at the same time on wind, but also on like brew. Like this is a class that also this thing bounce back whenever a hit deals more than 20% of your max HP, reduce all damage taken. It's
that sounds sick.
Pretty awesome. Banging effect for progression.
I wonder if that goes. Is that like with stagger or without? Like I wonder how that works.
Yeah, that's going to be a big problem if it's calculated after DRs and after stagger, then that's hardly ever going to proc unless you get hit by like a magic bolt.
I mean,
I don't know when you proc that. Yeah,
like Windwalker in Mythic Progression, pretty jazzed about that for a lot of fights. But yeah, you're right. If that doesn't look at pre-stagger damage, that's you're only ever proccing this against like Jailer autos.
Yeah, there's also a Brewmaster talent on the Brewmaster side called Anvil and Stave, I think, where it reduces your brew cooldowns every time you dodge or get hit. I think it's on the right lower side, I think.
Each time you dodge or an enemy misses you, the remaining cooldown on your brew is reduced by 0.5 seconds. Yeah, I saw this. This thing is... Does this have an ICD?
It has a 1 second ICD right now, but that's still so good.
Oh, what the hell?
Yeah,
Still,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
bananas.
So like you can take the old light brewing talent plus that, and you'll just have infinite brews, which is what gave you. Which is what, if you remember, like I could just never die with the buff on me at the time. That's kind of like a mini version of that. It's gonna feel like. And then the last thing I want to say about the brew tree, or at least the most important thing I think it's missing, is a self healing kind of branch, or maybe a one big self healing node. Like there's the instant vivify is like the only self healing throughput thing on the entire monk tree, and there's nothing for brew. And I really think they should add like Keg of the Heavens set or something less powerful, but at least throughput related for brew, so that you can spec into that and not have to be babysat by a healer again.
Yeah, because like on this side you've got like a couple of Mistweaver things and like Expel Harm, but nothing that's gonna actually give you like a real, I guess, yeah, instant vivifies. But still,
Yeah, I mean it's got Gift of
That's
the Ox
global.
and Celestial Brew, but that's like bare minimum. That's what you
Yeah.
have to have as a tank to even survive anything. So like they just need to add something, I think, instead of maybe Bone Dust or one of the other useless talents like Shocking Blow. I think's what it's called. They added that thing. Looks completely useless.
we've also seen the Demon Hunter class tree coming out and the Havoc tree, but not Vengeance just yet. Surprising amount of stuff happening on
Yeah.
the Demon Hunter tree as well.
It was
Notably,
really well received, wasn't it?
yeah, stuff like Chaos Nova for Vengeance, Sigils for Havoc are available now as well. The
Dark
Hunt
for Vengeance.
yeah, Darkness for Vengeance, yeah. So a lot of powerful stuff.
Blur
available.
for Vengeance too, right?
Yeah, Blur, Darkness, Sigil of Silence, all available here. And then
That is so sick.
yeah, I mean, like you could take Desperate Instincts as a tank. Blur reducing damage taken by an additional 10%, automatically trigger it with reduced cooldown and duration when you fall below 35% health. Like, that's kind of seems like a nice effect to have on your tank as well.
Yeah.
On
Oh yeah.
Vengeance.
PvP talent. Yeah, that
Yeah.
seems sick.
So definitely a cool thing there. And then over on the Havoc side of things, it's got some weird stuff going on. The weirdest part is momentum. Fell Rush, the Hunt, Vengeful Retreat, and Glide increase your damage done by 12% for 6 seconds. Now, with Glide being on there, that of course doesn't have a cooldown. So this is just, you will maintain your momentum buff. That it's like a slice and dice now, but on 6 seconds. So you're gonna have to pretty frequently be like jump gliding, and you want to jump glide, not double jump glide. So you're gonna want to keybind your glide and not just triple space bar for
Oh
this to
my
be less
God.
bad.
Okay, to be fair, my DH buddy in my guild messaged me about this, and he said that without gliding, you can maintain 19 and a half out of 20 seconds of the CD with momentum with just the other base abilities. So you technically don't even have to use glide if you don't want to.
Yeah, so it's a change from how momentum used to work, because Vengeful used to just be like 80 Fury over the next few seconds and not actually the damage buff side of things. But yeah, it depends, because like there are some fights where Vengefuling away was not like it was really fun, but it was like gliding will be more convenient on a lot of fights to not move as far. But
Yeah, true.
yeah, I'm not a fan of this, because I feel like the momentum playstyle is really fun, but I feel like just having it be like the momentum playstyle was fun largely because you couldn't get full uptime, and it was like you're having to think ahead and you're having to figure out like how you could do your movement efficiently with it. And now that Glide has come in, like kind of both of those things have gone away from it. So I'm less excited about this, but it does seem like by far the best stuff that's available on the tree. Notably, you do have to talent into I-Beam critting halfway down your tree.
Wait, really?
Yeah, pretty funny.
That's actually
then-
hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the glide thing. I feel like that's gonna get changed at some point.
It'd be worse if it was just a maintenance buff, though.
it is a maintenance buff
Well,
with this.
it's not 100% uptime, right?
Well, it is with Glide.
It is with glide.
Oh,
And
for some
pretty
reason I
much
thought there was like
without
a
it,
CD
too.
on it.
No, Glide doesn't have a CD, so
No. For some reason I thought there was like a momentum. Momentum had like an ICD for some reason. I don't know why I thought that.
don't think so.
Okay, never mind then.
Yeah, I mean, what Charles said, like even if you took Glide off this list, the fact that Vengeful has gone onto this list is making it pretty high uptime just naturally. But even still, like I think you could do that and then tweak the numbers and it could be more fun and equally
definitely-
powerful, or even less powerful, and that way people who don't want the harder play style don't have to take it or don't lose as much damage by not taking it.
Yeah, I don't. That definitely seems like that's more limiting in design, adding glide, just because it makes it less interesting. Because you could just like bump it, like if it's not like a balancing thing, right? You could just bump the number up but reduce the effective.
Yeah, so
uptime.
the having glide on there, it does make it less punishing of a thing to screw up, because
Yeah.
like it reduces the skill ceiling of this, but also raises the skill floor, and that's, to me, like, that is a reasonable goal for momentum, but it's just like it also reduces how much fun it'll be to play, which is the sad part for me. But either way, I think it overall pretty exciting trees to see out of Demon Hunter. Definitely like not the feared, really boring, bunch of stats, that kind of stuff. Like they've got a lot of
Straight
different effects
line.
on here. Yeah, a lot of these effects are. Oh, there's a MS on Blade Dance if you want as well. Yeah.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Okay. So yeah, that's the talent trees. One final note before we get into talking about Great Push, some more is there is a Weak Auras channel in our Discord now, in the Titanforge Podcast Discord. If anybody wants to either contribute or yoink some, Discord join link is always in the bottom of the description and everything as well.
I think anytime we have a weak aura, instead of inevitably forgetting to put it in the description or publicly in the show notes or something like that, we'll just it'll just be in that channel.
Yeah,
beforehand
and
anyways.
I will continue to read out the full URL of any.
Oh, please, yes,
as well,
please
because
do that,
somebody
yeah.
tweeted to thank me for reading out the full URL of one of the links last week. So,
Dude, whoever tweeted that at Dratnos, I got a bone to pick with you.
all right,
There's
so
already a bunch of really good weak orders in that channel, by the way. And someone was asking for the world marker spam macro this morning in the Discord, and I need to put that in there. I just remembered. So there's going to be a lot more to come.
It's not just weak auras. There's also like other cool stuff. If there's like weird macros and stuff as well.
All right, so let's go into TGP. So we already talked a little bit about that, but I guess let's go back to just the start. Trell, how did you decide you were gonna compete in this to start with? Like, what was the process like of forming the team and then initial plans?
I mean, I've done a couple MDIs over the years, and the last MDI I did, I kind of decided I wasn't going to do something like this again unless I had a group of 5 that really wanted to do it, and everyone was like on the same page and wanted to do their best, So I decided with this group of 5 that we played with on live, we were like the rank 2 and A group last season at the end of the season. So I decided, this is a pretty good group. We could probably do it. So I asked them all if they wanted to, and they said yes. So that's how we got into it.
How did you guys decide how much to like practice, and how did you go about doing this in a season where there was a bunch of new dungeons rather than like older dungeons, which usually MDI is like at least a couple months, sometimes a couple of years more time on the dungeons, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. That was pretty unique this season because it was like week 3 of the patch was the first cup, and luckily these returning dungeons were all kind of known by most of the team. The WAD dungeons weren't known by us at all. We did a lot of testing and science in there to figure them out, but every other dungeon we kind of knew already, so it wasn't like the craziest thing. It was just adjusting to the new scaling and any new problems that the scaling presented, like the ushers being absolutely insane, skip ushers and lower Kara. Now that they nerfed them twice, you can probably pull them, but at the time we couldn't pull them. Upper Kara was like Upper Kara actually ended up being a completely different beast. This is a tangent I'm going on, but like Mana Devour is AoE. He just pulses like every 20 seconds. We had to make a weak aura for it because there was nothing in the Bigwigs or DBM mods for it. And that thing hits so hard where it didn't hit that hard in Legion that we had to like make timers for that mechanic and then a bunch of other mechanics too throughout the 4 returning dungeons, which I think we did a good job of. We made a lot of weak auras and stuff in advance. We altered our auto marker to include a bunch of mobs that weren't as important back in the day, but they are now, like Cinder Seers and Grimrail Depot. We got those on auto marker and emphasized Flame Tongue and all that well in advance so that we could just have that worked out and not have to worry about it.
How do you feel about some of the changes to dungeons, specifically like lower Kara got changed, upper Kara chess event already got changed, the healing. Did like,
Dude,
how do you
that
really look
Chessman
at some of these
heals
changes that have
so
happened?
much. Um, I I don't think healing on the Chessman was the biggest thing, although it's a nice change. I think most of the changes have been good so far, but they had a couple big ones they could have nailed out earlier in the season before the first cup. Like the chess room is just terrible. Like there's so many spots where you can't have line of sight on your party members. Like if someone dies, you just literally can't B-res them unless you're in like a perfect pixel spot on a random corner in the room because you don't have line of sight technically. If the chess pieces jump to a certain square, you literally can't even attack them because there's no line of sight to that spot. There's a bunch of things like that that they should have fixed faster, but I know it's hard to do all the testing, especially when the new expansion's coming out too.
Yeah, I remember that chess hall always having weird line even back in Legion. So, um, I will say there's been a lot of work though going into all the dungeons. Lower, of course, just gotten like huge
Oh,
amounts
lower
of
just
changes.
got massacred. Yeah.
Dude, if you zone into lower this week, by the way, Maiden. So since they actually changed that like auto attack, like random bug from Maiden that's been present forever, the boss casts the shield and then just stands idle for 2 seconds, when normally it would swing, and then it starts its cast. So they actually nerfed the shield again effectively by giving you 2 more seconds to break it.
Yeah, honestly, that dungeon is starting to come more in line with other dungeons. I think if they were to nerf the auto attack damage, the white swings on the trash behind the stage, and then probably the horse area, the bottom of the attunement area, I think if they changed the auto attacks to hit less, that would be way more in line with other dungeons. But all these nerfs they've done have been so good to bring it more in line finally.
May I point your attention to one spectral attendant?
Yeah. They're
Dude, we
nuts.
chain wiped to the spectral attendants today.
I mean, you just don't pull retainers in attendance. Let's be honest.
Yeah, no, those things are awful. Awful.
Yeah,
awful.
the thing about the dungeons is like the difference between the best mobs and the worst mobs is not actually that important for like high end players, right? Because you just don't pull the worst mobs, whatever they are. So if they're like
Right.
20% worse than the best mobs versus 400% worse than the best mobs, it doesn't really matter, right? Because you're skipping them either way. But then for like normies going into that dungeon, pulling ushers, pulling attendants, pulling retainers, pulling sentries, right? It's like that was or
Wardens.
guardsmen, yeah, wardens and all those
Oh
mobs.
yeah, wardens. The nerf
Yeah.
on those were really good.
Like
They gave
that,
more count now. Oh my god.
yeah,
Yeah.
it should really help with the phenomenon of nobody playing that dungeon. Something like 5 times less keys done at 15 or higher than like the more popular dungeons in lower. So last week, which
Well, last
be
week was
fair,
doomed.
that was also the first boss was like omega hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
There were before all the nerfs to lower, there was something critically dangerous about every single mob and boss in the whole dungeon. And I think they've knocked out like 3/4 of them now. So it's looking good.
yeah. Do you remember like the philanthropists when they would throw coin and murder your tank?
throw coin,
when
dude.
their swirlies were less visible and faster, and there were more of them. Now it's just
So
like
throw coin actually has a soft spot in my heart because that's when I was a new tank player back in Legion. Like the first time I was trying to do good at Mythic Plus, I was tanking lower carrot and I got to a level of key where throw coin started to chunk my health, like 3/4 of my health. And I was like, I don't understand. How does this spell even work? And so I figured out that it was like a physical spell that went through mitigation and staggered like it was magic damage at the time and still did until they removed it. But yeah, that kind of thing's insane. And then because I knew that, that's the same thing that happened in Mists of Tyrannus Scythe with the dragon hit. It went through mitigation and hit Brewmasters like it was magic. And that's also how the throw spear worked in Iron Docks until they nerfed
Oh,
that too.
the Wrangler.
Mhm.
Those mobs are still illegal. Even still.
But yeah, throw coin was insane. Like that had to go. I'm glad that they're more aware of these things now that the dungeons return, and you can tell they've gotten a lot better at like fixing some of that crazy stuff.
okay. So going into Great Push specifically, how did the tournament go for you guys as a whole? Like what was day one like? You come in and the dungeons were docks, lower, streets, and upper. How do you decide? Docks, lower, streets, and workshop. How do you decide where to go there and like what to do on day one and how did it all go?
Day one was interesting. So this is the first actual great push that all of us have done. So I didn't really have a good plan going into it. In hindsight, I think we still did the best we could on day one. Like you just kind of have to see the affixes and then decide like within seconds where you want to go. And we picked the easiest affix combo, which I think is the right choice in hindsight. So we just like we didn't have to think much about the dungeon. We just went in and started going. Then we like talked about what we were going to do as we did the dungeon. But what we didn't do is we didn't prepare like two chest easy routes. We were just doing like the high key route, like the plus 30, you know. And so that is something that I really should have thought about more and integrated into our prep, where we just like would have done way more risky stuff to ensure that we two chested plus 24, plus 26. I mean, we didn't know what the key start level was going to be either until the second the tournament started. But we still should have had a plan just in case, which I will next time, obviously.
So, just for some context, you guys like depleted, or not depleted, you guys only one chested 24 workshop. You guys were the only team that one chested that 24 workshop. Like, how bad was that? And like, what would you have done differently? Would you have just zoned out after your wipe on Zulgamux, or?
Oh, I would have instantly said zone out now that I know how that goes. Yeah, that was terrible. That lost us like 25 minutes of game time. And then the same thing
just that
happened
they
in
one
Upper
chested
Kara.
the dungeon, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel about the time in the dungeon? Like, how much pressure were you guys feeling on the 5 hours? Did it go by really quick, or like, was it a long day, or both?
It does go by really quick, surprisingly. Like you're suddenly just at the end of the day. I'd say like 4 out of 5 hours felt pretty good stamina wise, and I'm even getting kind of old now. I'm turning 30 this year, and like I was lasting to the end of the day. But like the last dungeon we did was grueling. Like and we kept doing lower carry every day because it was the longest key, so it was like the most time efficient way to end. But like during those lower carries, I was just like brain scrambled because it was a long day. But even so, it felt like a short day up until that moment.
Really good question from chat. Did you end up feeling like the keys started at the appropriate levels? Because they start at 24.
I don't know if I've done enough great pushes to say that was like the right key level. I felt like that was fine in this case because you went like 24 two chest, 26 two chest, and then +1/+1 in most cases, like +1 to 28, +1 to 29. But I think Junkyard should have started at like 30.
Yeah.
32.
Yeah, I mean, like
but
you
only
said,
because
though,
it was unbalanced.
the thing about the Junkyard, right, is like, okay, yeah, if you think Junkyard started like 4 key levels below where it was supposed to, it's still 1 3 chest and then bang, it's 29, 1 3 chest again and bang, it's 32, right? Like, if it starts at 30, you 2 chest it to a 32, or maybe 3 chest it to a 33, and then so it takes like 25 or 30 extra minutes to get to the same point. I agree with you. Like, people talk about the key level starting too low, like, oh, Blizzard they don't know how high the teams are going to go, but it's like, okay, if the key starts at 30, teams are going to be just like wiping all day pretty quick. Like, pretty quick, we're just going to be watching teams bashing their heads against the walls of push keys. And like the way that it worked there where it's like, day 1 they're pushing up, day 2 it's like still mostly pushing up but starting to hit the ceiling, and then day 3 it's like, okay, now we're starting to see like some of the failure. Like, it's I think that it's actually better than if we start that, like, if we started like 1 key level lower than where all these ended up, right? If it's like we started this on, say, 28 docks, 28 lower, 29 streets, 28 upper, 29 workshop, 33 junkyard or something like that. It's like, okay, there's a couple of easy keys in there. Maybe there's a couple of keys that some teams are going to one shot, and then there's like a lot of, we're going to spend 3 days watching teams wipe. Which
I agree with that take, except for the fact that I think you would see a higher ceiling if they did start higher. Like, you'd see more teams do 30 iron docks or 30 upper, maybe even a 31 docks somehow if you got enough attempts,
You would see more teams with the 30 docks in there, but I would argue that, if we did that and it was like, okay, teams are all getting to kind of like the actual ceiling, right? And it's like, oh, Ambition did their 30 docks on the first try, but these other teams did it on their 5th try, and then neither team could do the 31, and, they both have the same time. I actually would argue that's less skill testing than one where it's like, okay, these 2 teams both had 2 tries at the 30 docks, or Ambition got the try at the 30 docks because they 2-chested earlier, and then they converted and actually did it on the first time. Like, I'd argue that's...
It depends on how much you value like world first keys and like theoretical caps of dungeons and stuff like that too, though.
Yeah, I mean, not really.
I think both sides are cool. Like I think the two chesting strategy is very important, and like that's my biggest regret is not preparing that. But like that's pretty cool to see teams two chest like a hard dungeon to two chests. But also it's really cool to see teams time at 31 docks. So someone in chat actually just said that where this is probably fine for regionals starting at 24s, 25s, but maybe globals they started at 28s or something. That'd be pretty cool in my opinion.
28s, jeez.
Yeah,
I would be more of an advocate for like 26 or 27 maybe, but maybe 28. Holy.
Then
some of those dungeons on a 28 are already like Iron Docks on a 28 is just like a hard ass key. Like that is difficult to time on a 28.
Iron Docks is just hard in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially, I guess this was after the Wrangler nerfs, right? What's it?
Yeah, even so, Wranglers are still nuts. Like
those Wranglers are still okay. Basically, double Wrangler pulls are still egregious.
Yeah, and that was tyrannical, by the way. And you could not pull 3 Wranglers on tyrannical at that level.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've done keys on live this week. You can't pull them on fort. Like there are packs that are like that right there off limits. No, not today.
Okay, so we are going into the EU weekend of TGP next time. This was the NA1 Ambition and Donuts and Despair. Got the NA qualifications. The thing about the EU region is that they are even closer in the team. Like all 6 of their qualifying teams are really, really good. I guess I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Proving Grounds.
Yeah, that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, like the 6th best team was on 29-29, and the best team was on 31-30. The best 3 teams were all on 31-30, there's a little bit of a gap, but not a huge one. That's very high level.
Their top 5 putting up at least 30-30 is crazy, by the way. That it is very difficult to explain how challenging it is for all of the teams to be putting up 30-30.
To make the point, right? It's like Trell, your team got 29-29, and that was 3rd place in NA to qualify.
You would have qualified for 6th.
That was tied for 6th in Europe. Yeah, tied for 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Stopped. We did stop on the time trials once we got the 229s done on Saturday morning because we had 3 more days to do more if we wanted to, and we really should have in hindsight. But yeah, it is what it is.
I heard most of the European teams called it after they slammed 30-30. They were like, okay,
well,
that's fine.
That's objectively not true because of the teams that did 30-30.
And 3 pods and speed, literally the moment that they did 30-30, they were just like, okay, that's enough for us.
Yeah, that's the thing about this as well as seeding doesn't really matter, right? It's like if you qualify, it's not like MDI where you want to play the other like the easiest team first, right? It's just like, it doesn't really matter. So that being said, Echo do come in with slightly slower times than Monka and GigaChad, so technically they are Tettles will make the argument a dark horse pick to win the
well, they're the 3rd seed.
Yeah, so
okay, well, I mean it's hard to say, right? This is the first time they've ever put time trial dungeons in the tournament, so and these time trials were done before the NA tournament too, so likely most teams were doing the same thing that we were.
Yeah. So
before we get too far, we had Junkyard in the last day. What did you end up thinking about Junkyard as a whole? It has been by far the most criticized dungeon just because of the... Okay, typically it's because of like the King's Rest effect where variance is so bad in the wrong direction, but this one is like, you could time a 40.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably time a 37, 38, I think.
Yeah,
but
you literally weren't allowed to because the keys only go up to 35 on TR, apparently. It's unclear how they work on live. Yeah. Maybe somebody will find out this season.
You can go higher on live. But the way
anybody?
the system works on TR is... No, I don't think yet, but
okay.
Technically you could. But the way it works on TR is you have to make the keys with scrolls yourselves, which I also found out the day of the tournament. I didn't know that before. I thought the turnip was going to give us keys. But the scrolls only go to 35, so that's why it stops there.
Yeah, so... because you definitely could go higher than 35 in that dungeon. Maybe not that much higher, but with the affixes that you guys had, but at least a level or 2 seemed possible. But yeah, it was pretty funny that it just bashed up against that ceiling.
Yeah, what did you end up thinking about that? Like, Dreadness, like you and I ended up casting it. What were your initial thoughts on it?
I mean, I kind of liked it because it was kind of chill for the first 2 hours of day 3, and then we went back into all the danger dungeons for us, and Unfortunately, we had a mishap in every single one, but the first 2 hours of day 3 were really fun, honestly, pushing up Junkyard.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because like it's clearly just horrifically undertuned compared to every other dungeon, right? It's like there's a multi-part reason, right? The timer is too long. The shock bots are OP. Even when the shock bots don't scale up any further past level 30, they're still like OP. Grease bots and welding bots are OP. The bosses are not too
so
bad.
OP.
The trash is free. You know, it's like the dungeon is just like several key levels easier than the other dungeons, which is a problem.
There were teams close to 2-chesting it while running multiple cheat death trinkets on non-tanks.
Yeah. That being said, like given that it's in the dungeon pool of the season, I think obviously you got to put it in the Great Push, right? Otherwise, that would be kind of weird if you just like there's no Junkyard there. So I don't know. Well, we saw it played, I agree with Trell that it was like a kind of cool change of pace. I think ideally it would just be balanced equally to the other dungeons, but I don't actually think they should do that at this point. I think the only change I would support would be a timer nerf to the dungeon, but I don't actually think they should like give it lethal abilities that it didn't already have at this point. That should have been like PTR activity.
Junkyard is just so problematic too because like you can't put it in day 1 or day 2 because like how TGP works is like there's eliminations on day 1 and day 2, and if you put Junkyard in, then you're forced to go there, push it all the way up, and then you're able to like go to any other dungeon. So there's no good decisions for like routing or like dungeon decisions.
Yeah, there is, right? Like imagine if it was in day 1 this time, right? Like what would have happened? Teams would have gone 26 3 chest, 29, or I guess it would have been on 24. So
they would have spent 3 hours in Junkyard on day 1.
That's not how, like, and your math for this was disproved on day 3 as well. You came in day 3 saying how long it would take to push up, and it didn't take that long because teams were 3-chesting the 29 and everything. Yeah, okay. It's like, so you'd come in and you 3-chest the 24. That would take you 25 minutes, right? You'd 3-chest the 27. You get to the 30, you'd probably, 2-chest the 30. And then you'd be sitting on a 32 Junkyard. Maybe 3-chest 30. Yeah, I agree. That's something that like some teams would 3, some teams would 2, probably like the best teams would 3. Then you're sitting on either a 32 or a 33 Junkyard in your pool. You've used an hour and a half on it or something, or 2 hours on it, and love points there are as easy to get as they are from 24 or wherever else now. And
okay,
you know, I don't think it would break the competition to put it on 1 or 2. Like it would have been. Everybody would have spent the first hour and a half in Junkyard, and maybe that would have looked bad, but that's what they did on day 3 anyway.
I mean, they spent the first hour and a half in Iron Docks or whatever anyways, so it's...
Yeah. I don't think it would have been prohibitive.
I think the root of the problem is just that it was so unbalanced that it hit the freaking cap on dungeon scrolls. Like, that is the problem. They could have either made more dungeon scrolls higher or balanced the dungeon a little bit better.
Did you like that it hit the cap, or because it gives you reprieve, right? You're like, all right, this is the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was chill for me, but I think from a viewer perspective, it was probably pretty boring. Like, once they realized how easy 35 was for every team, they're like, oh, okay, they have like 5 minutes to spare.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, it was like every single team 3-chested the 26, every single team 3-chested the 29. I think every single team 2-chested the 32, and then almost everybody beat the 30, or everybody beat the 34. And 3 out of 4 teams beat the 35, which is like, okay, you know.
Sorry to show him lock in chat. I didn't mean to insult you guys.
He's so
worry,
mad.
We missed some keys too. It's all good.
Yeah. Okay. I guess let's move on to talking about the Ian interview. But first, we have our tip of the week segment. My tip of the week is Great Push competitor Sense has updated the blockable reflectable spells spreadsheet, which Tettles will post maybe in chat, and I'll be in the description and stuff, maybe in one of the channels in the Discord or something as well. I don't know. But it has...
It's in the show questions channel already.
Okay, yeah. A full list of abilities, damage type, blockable, reflectable, and notes on how exactly it works on every ability, so you can see like going into raid or going into any of the dungeons what sorts of buttons you should be using reflect on, which trash mobs are reflectable, because there's a lot of inconsistent behavior, and particularly using your reflect on the things that do the damage back to the mobs is big value, and then like using it on things that it just deflects a tick or whatever is less big value. Yeah,
it's awesome.
The biggest thing to reflect is like the Rylax in Iron Docks. Their fire One of their fire casts is reflectable. I don't remember exactly which one.
Did
What
you guys
ability it
know
is.
that you can reflect
Lava
the chess
barrage.
events AoE?
It does insane amounts of damage.
Yeah, you
Like
can do
a
it
million damage.
in upper. The Royal Slash does damage back to the king. Yeah, if you time this right, he casts his Royal Slash. You kill a chess mob. The Royal Slash cast still goes through even though he's stunned, and you reflect back through the damage reduction. Like the damage reduction is gone. Yeah, that's big value.
Yeah, it's massive. If only a warrior could live Mana Devour, that would be really sick.
Hold on. What does that say? Do not reflect this. Wait. What is it? What does it say?
Spider Leech
It's-
Life. Do not reflect this. It puts the debuff on the mob, who then heals off itself. Yeah, so it's a it's a debuff that leeches damage. But yeah, yeah, you don't want to do that.
That's sick.
So yeah,
Do
very
not reflect
useful.
this.
Very useful prot warrior spreadsheet. And DPS warriors can learn a thing from this too, although not a huge thing. So like for instance, on Vizdoom, DPS warriors, like this spreadsheet isn't optimized for you, but on Vizdoom you can taunt during the disintegrate cast, and he'll always do a burning blast out of that. And so you can taunt reflect after the disintegrate, not take an auto, and reflect back a burning blast and do huge damage whenever it's available. This sheet doesn't have
that
like
one's big too.
info about where that's easy to do or anything like that, but it does tell you what's reflectable, and that is going to be true for DPS and tanks.
If you're if you're far enough away from the infiltrators as well, you can also reflect like the claws.
Yeah,
the
if you-
vampire claws, which is like really nice.
If you taunt them while their claws are ready, and then you get in range them, right, they'll claws before autoing. You got to be careful though, because like if you're in melee
Yeah.
with them and you're gonna taunt while their swing timer is up as well, and so yeah, that is a big move though. Saves your tank
to
a
be
lot of
playing-
damage too.
Be playing with the
Oh,
tank
yeah.
that also knows what's going on, because like if they see, like, they may not even notice the
Right.
infiltrator who lost threat on it randomly.
Yeah, or they may
Well,
see
dude,
it lose threat
half
and
the time-
instantly retaunt.
Yeah.
I played with Luigi a lot last season, and half the time he taunted something to reflect, I'd taunt back so fast because I
Yeah.
was used to threat dropping that he wouldn't get the reflect, and he was like, come on, man.
Yeah. Same with kicking the spell that you're trying to reflect. And all of this for both DPS and tanks you want to be communicating with your group about, and recognize the spots where in a pug they're just not going to let you get your reflect, and you shouldn't worry too much about it. Okay, Trell, what is your tip of the week?
Mine is about the infiltrators as well, since we're talking about them. So when anyone aggroes the infiltrators, it puts anyone within 40 yards of that dude in combat. So what you can do is have someone that has a combat drop, like someone that's Night Elf or a Hunter, Mage, Rogue, tag the pack to activate it, and then they can vanish or whatever. Then you can like cherry pick a mob out of the pack if you want. So you can pull just the infiltrator, or if it's like a 2-pack, you can pull just the other mob. A common strategy in Great Push was to pull just the dog next to Zolgamax into the boss, but not pull Zolgamax. So that's how they did it. Everyone was like 40 plus yards away initially, activated it, then ran up and grabbed just the dog without aggroing him.
Cool strategy, yeah. Also something to be aware of anytime you're trying to skip those mobs is like they
Yeah.
will pulse that. So if you're trying to do like somebody stealths through and then the rest of the group dies and gets masked or whatever, not gonna work because it's gonna put your druid in combat if they're close enough to that thing as it gets converted.
Are there any other like useful ones? I saw some where it's like one of the Zolgamux is an Iron Docks. Maybe people were playing like that pretty early on, but now they're not really playing like that anymore.
Yeah, there might be some useful ones here and there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but
There's
it's
like
something good to know, especially just the aggro radius.
Oh, dude. There's that infiltrator in Upper Kara that you basically always should invis potion through, because I've seen so many times people just like drag that infiltrator out and just combat the whole entire group whenever you're trying to stealth.
Which one?
The Upper Kara, like the Pyromancer, not the Pyromancer. It's the one that's on the bridge, like right before chest.
Yeah, the Slayer or
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, those you just
The hammer,
Absolutely.
the hammer
Yeah.
people.
Every
The
single
hammer
thing
people
on that
that's
bridge
next
is
to the
banned.
Pyromancer.
yeah.
Pyromancers are so awful. Have they nerfed those yet? I didn't see, but
No.
they've gotta
There's
do
also
something about
there's also the workshop one, the one that everybody gates and somebody inevitably messes up the gate every single time.
it. Yeah,
Hug left on
that's
that
great.
gate. Hug left on the gate. Hug left on the gate.
That's a good tip of the week, actually. Like where your character's position is when you take a gate stays all the way through the gate and ends at that same position at the ending gate. So it's actually like really good to know. You should be very center on this gate or very left to avoid aggroing something.
Mm-hmm.
Like skipping the 2 golems at the beginning of Upper Kara. If you have a warlock, gate makes it really safe, but you should take the very, very middle of the gate.
Yep.
All right, Tettles, What are we looking at in this Iron Docks?
So some Oshir technology. So basically, there's a way that you get Oshir to only open like one set of dogs, and then beyond that, only open like Rylak cages. I think there are like a bunch of different spots in this room that are like this. Maybe Trell knows a little bit more than I do, but I haven't seen anybody using this spot that's being shown here. A lot of people are tanking him kind of near the stairs, but you need to know that tanking him next to the stairs, if you're not tanking him properly, you have a chance to reset the boss.
Yeah, there's something to do with line of sight for sure, because in the 28 we did in Great Push, we were so confused because he just didn't spawn wolves on the boss, and we were like holding CDs for the wolves, and then he just never spawned them, so we got like totally screwed up on our CDs. But it was because we think that we had him so close to the cage that he didn't have line of sight on a different cage that was like across the room that he was trying to target to open the cage. And so I think this spot works because he's line of sight on like 5 or 6 of the potential choices or something.
Even with tanking him in a correct spot, I'm like, you normally I haven't seen a spot where you're not getting the first set of wolves yet either. But like, look at this right here. So how he's tanked right there, he's trying to reopen that cage even, and then just nothing happens. There are different spots that do different things to this boss, and I would recommend just going and testing it if you have some time. There is one though that is like next to the stairs towards the end, like on this concrete, I guess is how I would describe it. But you do have a chance to reset the boss if you're not tanking it properly. So I would say go test around with this, but there is some weird stuff that you can do with this encounter.
There's some really interesting things in Iron Docks boss mechanic wise, because if you remember, the second boss was also the same way. Like if you line of sighted the very middle of the room, they wouldn't do any abilities.
Yeah,
and we found out
that
from Blizzard
crazy.
that it's because they put an invisible NPC at the middle of the boss rooms, and that NPC is what triggers with line of sight for some reason the boss abilities. So I'm sure it's a very similar fix they're going to do for that boss.
Yeah, I do think there's a good chance that this is something that will get fixed soon on Oshir, but yeah, for now we'll put a link to that BDGG Nate video in the description and stuff for anybody who wants to go look at those spots, and like Tuttle said, try out the one by the stairs as well. Okay, let's do the Ian interview. So again, for this one, obviously, go watch the whole thing if you want to. There's a Wowhead post that will be what we'll link, and that also just has embedded the entire interview. But this has the live blog as well, and potentially by the time this comes out, there will be just the full summary of it, and that might be what we link to instead. But for now, we will be using this one.
Yeah. Content on a Thursday. Who could have possibly predicted this?
Very, very legendary for us. So, Tettles, why don't you lead us through this? What are some parts of this interview that you wanna talk about?
Okay, so I guess the first thing that was presented was talking about just like dinars and targeted loot. Basically, so as everybody knows, they probably know what dinars are at this point. One of the biggest points that Ian was talking about, and like the success of Season 4 in Shadowlands, they think that like dinars are a good way of having targeted loot specifically. But how Ian presented the argument was, it's a little bit too fast for our liking, but we do think that like having some deterministic loot system is something that we would like moving into the future. And I think that that's something that, personally, players have been calling for a while. I think that targeted loot just seems like something that is almost inevitable. Like, we had a Great Vault, and like even the Great Vault, it was better than BFA and Legion chests, but it's still not targeted enough where players are grinding this loot. And not enough loot is... We have an issue of, like, you have too much loot, but at the same point, you don't have the exact loot that you want, and it's very difficult to get your BIS. And so I suspect that there's going to be some... At least how it was presented, there's going to be some deterministic loot system come Dragonflight. It will not be dinars, though, Ian stated.
Yeah. I mean, of course it wouldn't. There's no lore reason for them to be in the Dragon Isles, given that they are from the cartel, so, write that one
The cartel's
down.
everywhere, right?
That's true, yeah, that's what I've learned from Breaking Bad.
Good show. One of my favorites.
So, I think this makes sense. I think that something like Creation Catalyst's timeline, like maybe 2 weeks before when Creation Catalyst came out for full tier, to start letting you like not just tier, but like anything deterministic get, seems good, because I do agree. Like, it feels like dinars have been kind of good speed or maybe even slow this season, but that's because it's like loot we've already had, right?
Yeah.
Like if it was actually like a fresh tier, I do agree that keeping it for that later timeline does make some sense.
Okay. Next thing was I'll just pose this question to you guys, and you guys can give your take. Is the Mythic Lockout an outdated mechanic?
That's
Raid.
a good question.
For Raid specifically.
I don't really care too much about this. Like, what is the benefit of unlocking the Mythic Lockout?
Easier to pug.
Okay, how many like mythic pugs are we really looking at existing though in a like, and not in this tier, because obviously this, you know, in season
Should
4,
Mythic be
it's
as hard as it is? I guess is also another question that kind of ties into this.
Yeah, Mythic is sweet. I love Mythic.
I feel like you can't just unlock it because, I mean, that just deletes the whole concept of like racing against other guilds, like at any given level. I think, right?
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
guilds
not
would
past
still.
like.
My argument is that it just wouldn't change too much, so it's not too important. Like, it would let people pug, but people wouldn't really pug too much until the point in the season where they pug anyways, even with the lockout. Not very many people would make use of like the fact that you'd be able to bail and go join another pug and stuff like that. And in the extent where they did do that, is that even desirable behavior, or do we want the kind of bigger commitment and less feeling like people might leave at the first wipe in the pug?
Yeah.
So I think that it's the kind of thing where it's like, I don't think it would affect guilds very much at all to change it, and it would affect the pugs a little bit, but there's not very many pugs, and I don't have a strong enough opinion about whether it would be a positive or negative effect on the pugs that do exist. I think Ian's point here that it would be potentially detrimental because people not auto bailing on groups as soon as they start to struggle. Like, I could see that starting to happen if Mythic was unlocked.
Yeah.
Just in summation, Ian also states Mythic Raid is not a difficulty that is meant for pug players, and while some people will pug it, that is fine. He like wanted players to know there's going to be ramifications, but he believes that the lockout is an example of healthy friction in the game.
Yeah, again,
We're strictly just talking about like not being able to raid with other groups, right? Not about loot lockout.
Yeah,
right. This is just like changing it from the way the Mythic Lockout works to the way the Heroic Lockout works, right? Where it's like you're loot locked per boss instead of to like a raid ID.
Yeah, I was thinking loot at first. I feel like just the group lockout is fine if they unlocked it, like maybe after the first few weeks or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it would change too much, right?
Yeah, I agree with Drynos on that.
Okay, I have a couple situations, and just hypothetically, what about guilds that only have like 19 players that you would like to pug somebody in? And in addition to that, what about guilds that would just like to purchase like a lockout that has everything cleared except for the last two bosses just to get like loot faster?
Yeah, I mean, you can do the first thing. Guilds already do that first thing, getting somebody to come help your Mythic run, getting somebody unsaved to come and do Mythic with you.
Okay.
If I think it would be bad if you could just like get mercenaries that are saved already that week that have already killed that boss to come in and help you kill the same boss. That would mean my guild would probably start just doing that as our sales would be. We'd be just loaning out mercenaries to help guilds prog bosses or whatever, because we could just do it multiple times per week. I think that would be pretty painful and not good for Mythic progression as like an experience in the lower end guilds.
True.
Should guilds be able to buy Mythic lockouts and skip to bosses they haven't, killed the bosses before? Again, you already can do that, but it's high cost because then that lockout can't be used by the other people who have that lockout can't use it without inting you, right?
I've heard some people
like...
were selling jailer lockouts like really close to cutting edge so that people could prog the boss.
Right, which is like...
I mean, that only happens like when the guild takes a break after they get cutting edge or maybe like a holiday week, right? That's like the only time someone would ever sell their lockout.
Right, which is so like... Do we want that process to be easier and more common, or as it works currently, which is like it's not really a feature of Mythic raiding? It's something that happens very, very rarely and is hard to set up. I would argue the latter. I don't think it would be good for Mythic raiding if it was like, well, we've killed these 4 bosses and the next boss is really hard, but there's 3 easy bosses after that, so we're just going to skip Painsmith and we're going to farm Guardian, KT, and Fate Scribe for the next few weeks because those bosses are easy and have good loot, and we'll just have somebody who's already killed Painsmith open the way for us. Like, I think that would be bad, not good to change.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Cross-faction guilds is also a topic of discussion. Is there any progress being made to the technical limitations preventing cross-faction guilds, which there's progress being made, something they want to do. They'd like to do it before 11.0. It's in the hands of a lot of engineering problem solving and pulling on a thread in systems that weren't really meant for it. They recognize the awkwardness. Some issues are just bugs. Things like responding to the group messaging through the group finder, not always working, is considered a bug. It should work seamlessly. The fact that it breaks your lockout is outmoded, shouldn't happen. It's the byproduct of an old system that will take time to change.
What do you mean it breaks your lockout? I would never know anything about that.
you ever faction change midweek?
I did on accident. I locked myself from Sire even. I thought they fixed it. And then I locked myself from Sire after Faded. I was like, okay, this is the dumbest
Oopsie.
thing. Yeah, my bad.
You got to remember, in the World of Warcraft patching system, that's so complex that at any given patch, they might roll back a fix that they already did on accident. So you could just walk in and have the same problem that you had 2 patches ago.
Yeah, true. But yeah, I think the fact that they are looking to expand the cross-faction stuff is actually very, very important, and continuing to blur the lines between like factions. I think that like cross-faction guilds, I would really like to see that being a core feature of 11.0. If it can't be 11.0, it probably should be like 11.1. In my mind, that's something that needs 10 and 10.1. I think that's something that needs to happen like relatively quickly.
Yes, it would certainly be very bad for a lot of people I know if they had to switch back to Horde for next tier because you needed to like be in your guild again for Prague.
It just sounds like it's not engineering wise like super feasible for them to be able to do it. Which is this is why the communication is important for them to be able to go out here and say this kind of thing. Kind of gives some open level of communication between the players, and so you kind of understand what to expect.
Yeah, that is actually really nice to know. I hope they can work that out before, but you can definitely tell there's a chance they don't.
Yeah, I am somewhat scared. Like, I think there is a chance that this is a bold-faced lie, and it's not as much of an engineering problem as they want to roll it out slowly because they were concerned about the the impact of doing it. But if it is actually just engineering problem, then yeah, I'm of course happy that they gave us what they did already, and hope that they solve it as soon as they can.
I'd be willing to take Ian at face value for this one. I feel like that's probably correct.
I mean, didn't they do the same thing with covenant swapping? They were like, well, there's no way to change this.
Yeah, the engineering problem shield is such an effective one because it generates this response from us of like being so understanding. But
because we don't know anything about it, right?
Right, because of course we don't know anything about the engineering, and like there's a lot of stuff that is really hard engineering in a game like this. But I will say, I agree with Trell that I believe in the past this excuse has been used when it is just a more convenient, higher percent, like more people will like this answer than the real answer. So
okay, fair enough.
I think there's a chance that's happening here, but I'm not confident either way. But if it is, then that's bad.
I do think there's a chance it's happening, but I also think that like there are bugs with cross-faction rating like that are currently persisting right now, which is which makes me also a little bit like I could see how this would be just broken.
Yeah, I could see it going both ways as well.
Yeah.
Talking about buffs, raid buffs, discussion about bring the player, not the class, the old philosophy that I loved so much. But that was the extreme end of a spectrum when they had less raid buffs and more party buffs, making group compositions very complicated and resulting in situations where you had a good player that didn't fit because you didn't have room for another melee group to support them. Now they're moving back to class representation where they want the best groups to be ones that include all 12, soon to be 13 classes. But they forgot to do this for a couple of the classes so far, apparently. Not having a single Warlock or Hunter in a 20-player group should be a detriment, even when they aren't the best ranged meta class. And in the next alpha build, we'll be seeing Evokers bringing Bloodlust, which doesn't change anything about Evoker because other classes have Bloodlust. And they want to add Battle Res to another class as well, likely Paladin, which also doesn't change. Adding something that other classes already have doesn't do anything to this. It does for 5-player content, but it doesn't change it for 20-player.
It does for 5-player content.
Yeah.
I think that H Pally, if they get battle res and 5-mans, is like, oh my god, that is so good for them because our druid being the only healer that has a battle res, or then you have to either play with like a different druid spec, death knights, or warlocks. Like, it's always been really, really difficult to get battle reses in composition. Okay, it's easy to find like a tier where you almost always have a battle res, but it's
This tier,
not
right?
every single tier. Yeah,
Like your DK, your Warlock both have it. It's like, okay. But yeah. I don't know. I hate the movement here. Also, they have been adding a lot of party buffs as well. Now there's like all the outlaw stuff.
I hate it.
Banners and Wind Fury and stuff. So they are, he's doing a little bit of shell game here because they are also adding a ton of party stuff in Shadowlight or in Dragonflight. But I also just hate the idea of needing to include one copy of each of 13 classes, mostly because it makes it really awkward to be like, hey, I'm a demon hunter looking for a guild. I'm not just looking for a guild that likes me and is fun to play with and raids my times. I'm looking for a guild that has exactly 0 demon hunters right now, because if they already have one, I'm not bringing much to the table.
Well, in addition to that, as a guild that is recruiting, you are literally willing to pick up any demon hunter.
Yeah.
One demon. Can you touch the boss in Chaos Branded? Come on in.
You're in.
And then
say less.
Guilds that have like multi-classers benefit so much under the system, which they always will, right? Multi-classing guilds are always the best, but they're even more best in a situation of like where the meta is valuable to be playing the right specs rather than like the right classes for your raid buffs. Like that's something like my guild is never going to be caught without a demon hunter because we have 5 people that can play demon hunter if we need to in a tier. But if you're in a guild that's not true for, and your demon hunter has like a vacation or a surgery or something like that, it's like, all right, well, your guild got owned there, and that's should have had more multi-classers, which I think is not the direction they should be pushing us, because it's already so good to be multi-classers and less fun.
The problem, especially for like actually not even just for DPS, but the problem just in general is like your average player, and I'll just use DPS numbers. Say you have 14 DPS on a fight. On average, they're going to contribute like somewhere between 7 and 10% of damage on the fight. 10% being like really high, and 7% normally being on like the lower end of this. The buff itself, like just the buff, generally will contribute somewhere around 2.5% of just the raid, like the full raid's damage. That is a crazy amount. Like that is basically somebody going from the lowest damage in your raid to by far the top DPS on your group, and it's not close.
Yeah.
True. That's actually a really good way of putting it.
It's just dumb.
Maybe they should bring them down to like 1% increased physical damage for Mystic Touch. Something like really small.
Yeah, but then you get to the point of like,
meaningful.
What's the point of this being here, right? Like it doesn't feel like anything ever, which it already kind of doesn't because it's just number change. But I don't know.
I don't know, man. I just don't. I think that raid buff meta is not the correct way of doing. And it's not even an issue in 5-mans. It's only an issue in like raid content, which is what these are for. These are called raid buffs, right? These are specific to raid, and I just think it is the wrong way of approaching like how to fit compositions in, especially in like if maybe there was like a more flex size or something like that, maybe it would make more sense. But with like 20-man mythic being the size that they normally like design the game around, more often than not, this does not sit well with me.
Yeah, I'm also feel like this direction makes the game somewhat worse, but again, it's not the end of the world.
They did say they were open to bringing back scrolls, but then they also, in the same sentence, Ian was also like, well, that would also kind of be annoying for 5-mans having to carry 10 scrolls.
Maybe they only work in raids.
It's going to be so annoying if they do that, because you're going to have scrolls in your inventory, like 3 different kinds of scrolls. You're going to have 2 different kinds of sharpening stones, like a bunch of enchants, feasts, augment runes, flasks.
They talk about those too.
Drums.
Yeah, where's the discussion of the sharpening stones and stuff?
It's talking about consumables.
Okay, yeah. Between sharpening stones, oils, and armor kits, they probably went a bit too far with the number of consumables used in Shadowlands raiding.
Amen.
Mainly done to try and help crafters feel more useful, but a world where you need to apply 5 different consumables makes them each feel a little less meaningful, and Dragonflight is addressing the issue of emphasized crafting in different ways. Poggers, get those stupid oils and stones out of my bags immediately.
But This
God,
is
I
like the
hate
same
them.
issue. Like right above that, he's talking about roping
Yeah.
the idea of bringing back scrolls. I think that that's just a mistake too. Like there should be something fixed about the buff system. It's not scrolls though, because if you die in a dungeon and you say scroll me, and there has to be 8 scrolls clicked, like there's something wrong.
Yeah, I think scrolls as a like imagine like a scroll that's like a giga expensive inscription craft, like a cauldron or whatever, and it just like scrolls your raid for the next hour or something like that on Battle Shout or something like that. And it's like, okay, you can use this. You only can use it in raids. You can't use it in dungeons, and you can use it to get your whatever missing buff you've got at high cost for professions and slightly less effectiveness. I think that could be a way to dramatically mitigate the pain of
I am in
the
on
class
that.
buffs.
That system, that sounds a lot better than the I'm in a 5-man. I need
Yeah.
8 scrolls.
Well, you got the weak
Endeavor.
aura, right? That's just like you just click on the weak aura and it sends all your you spam click it.
It's like a line of them. I
Yeah.
just click, 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 click.
Yeah.
You're rezzing your healer as a DK. Then you see a weak aura with 8 icons pop up on your screen. You have to click all 8 icons while tanking the boss.
Well, we need to make like a smart system that's like, okay, the only player missing is missing Battle Shout as a healer. We don't need to click the Battle Shout scroll just to further optimize it, you know?
Oh my god.
Get the weak aura authors on it. Snap. Stat is what I was going for there, not snap. Anyways, other discussion, dungeon rotation. What happens if in Dragonflight Season 1 you find a dungeon that's extremely good, best dungeon ever made, saddens M plus players when it rotates out? And they said, yeah, that's going to happen if it is there.
We are going to run this for 2 seasons minimum.
Because season 1 is going to be 4 Dragonflight, 4 old. Season 2 is the other 4 Dragonflight and 4 different old. Seasons beyond that are not yet determined. One of the challenges they came into in Legion was integrating a brand new dungeon into a series of dungeons players already mastered. It wasn't that Cathedral or Seat were necessarily that much harder, but the community had a week's worth of knowledge compared to a year's worth. Looking towards the later seasons, it's easier to introduce new dungeons in a full rotation because everything becomes a new experience at the same time, which does sound...
That's a woke take, actually.
That is a good take, yeah.
Well, okay, all right. I agree with that, except for the fact that Cathedral did need like 11 nerf passes to make it come down. Kind of like Lower Kara is right now, even though it wasn't a new dungeon.
I think that 2 or 3 months ago we were really, really negative on this. I think that having seen season 4, I think we're a little bit. I don't necessarily think it's the best decision, but I think that I'm a bit more lukewarm on it now. I'm fine to see it out and see how it plays, though.
I still think it would be better if Dragonflight Season 1 was just 8 Dragonflight dungeons, but I also think this will be fun, too. But, yeah, I continue to think it would be slightly better. Yeah, again,
I maintain my opinion on that. If they only have to design 4 dungeons rather than 8 to balance for Mythic Plus, I think they're going to turn out with higher quality. Hopefully that's true, as long as they can also not have to work too hard on the returning dungeons, because I think that's part of their goal with this. And then it's only
we
one
also
season.
reserve the right to take our opinion back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, depending on how good the dungeons are and how well tuned they are and how quickly they are retuned once things come out, either system could be great or horrible based on that, and also whether the seasonal affix is beans or not.
That's awesome. Well, this most Shrouded, I've actually had a lot of fun playing Shrouded.
Okay, here's a question for you guys. Do you think that they should go to simpler seasonal affixes as a general thing going forward if there's always going to be new dungeons every single season?
Because this one is pretty, like...
Because Shrouded is bare bones, right? Like, this is one of the least complicated affixes they've made.
I think less complicated seasonal affixes are way better than more complicated, because like complicated affix is fun at first, but then it almost always ends up being like a just more pain than it's worth, like Prideful was once you get to higher levels.
Yeah, like takes over the dungeon.
Yeah, like the whole dungeon's just about freaking pride instead of the actual mobs themselves. But whereas like Shrouded, it only feels good to pull more Shrouded mobs as long as you can live the pulls, which you can even up to like 35s in Junkyard, as you saw. You get more stat and you just have a good time. The only downside to this particular affix is that if you're a verse heavy user, you can't really scale with the affix very well.
It's funny. This is like probably my 3rd favorite seasonal affix, and this is like Encrypted is number 2, and Awakened is number 1. 2 of the 3 of those are very simple. And then obviously I think Awakened is a little bit more complicated, but like I think that like with Encrypted and Shrouded both being relatively simple, I've been a bit more of a fan of that. I just think in general they need to look at affixes just as a whole, like take an eclectic approach to them. I think like the on-death affixes, I don't know, it just limits dungeon design so heavily too. Whenever dungeon like Grimrail Depot, I don't know how you guys feel about Grimrail. I've actually not been hating like legitimately pushing that dungeon because it tests weird stuff that you normally aren't tested on, such as like survivability. It has like a large amount of survivability checks, which I think has been kind of fun to optimize. But half the affixes just make that dungeon so cringe. Like so bad.
Storming, quaking, sanguine,
spiteful, bolstering. Yeah. Like I don't want to done in any of those, man.
I don't think on-death affixes are the culprit there. It's like the space constraining ones, right? Like Sanguine being an on-death affix, but it's also like a space constraining one. But yeah, I do think a look at affixes is something I would have liked to see. But honestly, like what they've done to affixes over the past 3 years has been really good. Like most affixes are in a much better state than they were 3 years ago. So yeah,
I agree with that. Sure. It's just they still feel so oppressive in specific dungeons.
Yeah. I'd be open to more like nerfing certain dungeon mob interactions with certain affixes when they're a problem. But yeah,
I don't know.
I think they just make it hard. I think it was a good point that you brought up that they make it hard to make a meaningful seasonal affix not too intrusive, because there's already so many affixes affecting the quality of life in the dungeon and like the challenge of a really tight dungeon like Grimrail, that if you add a 5th affix or a 4th affix that's really heavy on gameplay, and like you got to change a lot how you're doing because of that affix, and it just, the combination of all 4 is too much sometimes.
There has been one seasonal affix that has interacted with other affixes, and it was infested. And it was the last time that it ever that any seasonal affix interacted with other affixes. I thought that was an issue of seasonal affixes. I'm pretty sure that's actually an issue of just the affixes themselves.
Yeah. That was. I agree. I remember, fortified sanguine on those kahunis.
You bolster them. You can bolster them.
Yeah.
I still think they should remove 1 affix, period, and just have it like 3 affixes for the dungeon, or something less intrusive, so that they can make more meaningful decisions on what they want to introduce for the seasonal affix or something. I don't know.
Tyrant still sucks, by the way.
All right, let's see. Then finally, I guess the last thing I want to talk about on this is the question that Ian asked of how would you feel about simultaneously releasing normal, heroic, and mythic raid difficulties all at the same time? This is a question he was asking the community. As members of the community, I guess we get to answer this since this is his question to us.
I think it'd be cool, but it really depends on the tuning of the raid. Because like even people in the top 100 guilds like we didn't even set foot in the mythic in season 3 until the 2nd week that it was out, because heroic was so hard.
Yeah, my guild spent 3 of our raid days, I think, on the first week of mythic doing heroic. We did heroic all the way up to jailer. We did heroic jailer week 1 as well, and we did splits of most of the bosses too. So we were busy even on mythic week doing heroic, and obviously like on heroic. So if heroic week hadn't existed at all and we were just straight into mythic, we would have spent even more time on heroic on mythic week, and then even more time on heroic the following week. Would that be a good
I think I'm a bad
thing?
candidate to answer this, because as somebody who raids like pretty high in mythic, I actually really like the heroic week to kind of get antiquated with the mechanics of the raids in a different way.
Yeah.
True.
I think that the current system would be better for my guild. I think it would be better for your guild as well to have like more fun. Having the heroic week where it's like, okay, heroic takes a long time this week. Like you're kind of doing prog on the last couple bosses, but you don't have to sweat, right? Because you're not like losing mythic time. I feel like the change for this would just make it so that like that week you would feel worse while clearing heroic, because you'd know every time you wiped that you were losing mythic prog time.
You're not like zone. I don't know. You really, because the nice thing about you having a heroic week first, at least for guilds that raid Mythic specifically. And the nice thing about having a heroic week first is you do the heroic week, you know that you have to re-clear heroic at some point, but that Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever Mythic comes out, largely you're going to be doing the first couple of bosses on Mythic, and that's honestly, at least for me, some of the most fun that I have is like that first day, right as Mythic opens, and you're like, all right, let's blast. But I do also understand that I am an extreme minority here. Well, I actually don't know what. So from my perspective, I wouldn't like this. I kind of prefer the current system, but I do understand why other people would.
The class of people that this affects is only the people who do Mythic raiding in the first few weeks anyways, right? Anybody else just already gets all of their difficulties at the same time, right? So it's not like one of the cases of like, oh, what do the Mythic raiders think versus what everybody else think. If you're not a Mythic raider, by definition, you don't care about this, right? Like this is something actually, that only affects you in the context of as a Race to World First spectator. And in my opinion, this would really hurt the Race to World First spectating experience, because instead of having an off-camera heroic week where they do their heroic splits would all be during the Race to World First broadcast time instead. So we would go from having
that'd be interesting.
4 days of splits last time to having 8 days of splits or whatever on broadcast.
As a man who gets paid on a day rate, I've changed my mind.
Cast 8 days of splits, please.
Dragonflight, you've actually convinced me. Never mind. Release it all.
I like our current system personally. The only thing I would actually really enjoy is if Mythic Plus item level was uncapped the first week, as if Mythic and Heroic were available the first week. But I get why that's probably not a good idea, I guess.
Yeah, the way that it kind of worked this season, right, where just like week 1, you could get 288s from end of dungeon really fast by just spamming a bunch of keys. And then 291 was heroic eye level. I do think that's an interesting thing to talk about, because the way that Mythic Plus functions on that week where eye level is capped is definitely kind of interesting. My pitch for this is uncap Valor day 1, okay? Uncap Valor day 1, but cap items so that they can't be upgraded above 8 out of 12 on the first week, and they drop at 9 out of 12 from 15s and stuff. Still have the eye level cap at where they drop on that first week if you want as well, but you cap the item upgrade at 8 out of 12 on the first week, 9 out of 12 on Mythic week, 10 out of 12 the week after that, 11 out of 12 the week after that, and 12 out of 12 like a month in. And so you can get as much Valor as you want. You can farm a bunch of M+ in the first week, but you have to farm a lot if you actually want to Valor upgrade your 5 out of 12 pieces from +6s or whatever up to the cap. And so it's like too much to be something that the Mythic Raiders have to do too much worrying about, especially because it's not going to be Mythic eye level or even close to Mythic eye level for the first month. And so you're not like pressured to rush that gear because it's capped below heroic eye level for like 2 weeks. But you still have the benefits of uncapped Valor of like feeling like blasting keys is giving you a useful currency. You can get your avoidance, you can get your leech, you can upgrade it, you can do all the like low key spamming if you want to, or you can push the score. And like both of those, I think the way that they work in season 4 with uncapped Valor is kind of a good place. Maybe nerf the Valor from low keys a little bit, or buff it from high keys a little bit.
I actually really like this idea. I think this is a perfect compromise because it doesn't immediately invalidate heroic raid gear because you're not upgrading to 12 out of 12 immediately, but it also lets you stockpile some Valor, and it doesn't invalidate like any keys you run after the first 4 runs of the week.
Yeah, that's always my
you want to actually
saddest
play the game that week, you know?
Yeah, my saddest thing is there's the week where I do 50 keys and I get Valor from 4 of them, and then there's the weeks where I do 1 key and I don't hit my Valor cap, and I'm like, dude.
You're getting claimed that you're gatekeeping people.
From what?
Gatekeeping Mythic Plus players a month, so Dratnos doesn't feel too pressured to do keys.
That's not at all. Like, I would do more keys under the system.
Yeah, we're actually
saying
that it's more worth doing the keys now.
Yeah,
especially because I hadn't mentioned it yet, but this also makes it so you can do 15s and actually get rewarded for those 15s.
Do you realize how much of a gatekeep the Valor cap is right now? Like, uncapping Valor and having a rising cap across all 15 pieces of your gear by 1 upgrade level per week, instead of being able to upgrade 1 more item 1 level per week with 750 extra Valor. I'm saying like 15 times less time gating than the current system.
But it's still less eye level than Mythic rating, right? Which I think is the issue, right?
Okay, so if you want to blame me for doing that and not Blizzard, who's already done that, then okay. But you're saying my system, which is the same.
I don't think your system is bad. I'm just saying
that is not a difference.
For the record, This is not coming from me.
Right. I'm just, the person in chat is that part of the system is not changed. It's already that way.
It's an interesting counterpoint. I think this would be a net benefit for everyone personally. I think that I don't know. It just invalidates all your heroic week gameplay much less.
Right. Yeah, because the way that it works with the current system of like the heroic week gear being locked at +6, you got this really weird gameplay pattern where it's like you still kind of want to farm M+ that week, but then you kind of want to also farm the same M+ next week for the higher item level drop of the same items
and everything.
And it's
I
like,
hate that.
Yeah.
I always feel guilty when I do 15s on the first week. I'm like, well, maybe I should be doing +6s because it's more efficient. Where I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's no fun.
Yeah. Whereas this way, it's like, okay, you get that item level drop the first week and then like upgrade it over time and just do a lot of keys and just upgrade that item that way, right?
I don't know if you guys have been paying attention. There are some people exploiting the current system of how Valor and loot drops, which I
the +2 stuff.
I don't know
right?
what they should do with that. Like Dryning and Shakib, I'm just gonna call them out. Dryning and Shakib have done. I think Dryning has something like almost 100,000 Valor farms this season, by the way, which is crazy.
Well,
both of them, Shakib walks around, I think natural, 25% avoidance, 20% leech. Dryning is somewhere in the order of 20% avoidance, 20% leech, and you're just it's tertiaries on every single piece. Everything is socketed. They sat in Junkyard and Workshop for literally forever. You want to know how they got this? They sat in +2s and boosted people through LFG because the Valor system is uncapped, and then they immediately upgraded all the pieces.
I mean, let's be honest. This is a combination of the Valor uncapped system and the Catalyst, though. If the Catalyst didn't exist, they couldn't do that, right? Like they can only do that on a couple pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it would
only
still
do that
be
on
good.
the pieces that aren't tier.
Right.
It's true. Like, it's true that would still be a good way to just get like deterministic tertiaries on everything. I would contend that the players that are currently doing that would all be busy with Race to World First. In a real tier, right? So I think it wouldn't be too much of an issue there. But I do agree that like that being a good and the only way to get guaranteed tertiaries is bad. So I would advocate for like 3,000 Valor to buy a scroll of avoidance that you can just then use on a piece to give it avoidance, or something like that.
Oh, that'd be sick. I'm down with that.
Yeah, that would be my preferred way around that, and then just everybody could farm their tertiaries late season. You could also, again, you could time that.
You'd have to cap. Avoidance is uncapped right now, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Possible there are unintended consequences. Possible that this would all be less fun to play than current system, but I do in general like the idea of experimenting with uncapping the Valor and capping the upgrades, because I think that would be better than the reverse, which we currently have.
Yeah.
Or not currently, but in Season 3 and before we did. And I assume we will again in Dragonflight.
I do just think that there is no good system that makes all players happy, right? I think that there is a way to move in the correct direction, but I don't think that there's any way that's going to avoid feeling like, oh, I'm being gate capped, and it's like, okay, well, that's not exactly the intent.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? But
yes,
in game theory, there's like a curve. It's like the Pareto curve or whatever, which is like there's a curve where you can't just get better on the spot for like you'd be just doing a trade-off between M pluses and raid anywhere along that curve, right?
Yeah.
And right now we are not at that curve. There are things we can do to make it better for M plusers and raiders without it being like a zero-sum thing. And so I think it's worth trying to find those things. But yeah, of course, there's always going to be some class of M plusers that are just always going to be mad that they, about the ways that raid is good, and raiders that are mad about having to ever go into M plus, or mad about ways that M plus is good, the tertiaries, that kind of stuff.
Ian did say that like Mythic Plusers, like we're looking at like gearing solutions for the future to make sure that there is parity. He said that there is going to be they are looking to make parity between Raid, Mythic Plus, and PvP, which is better than what they've said in the past. So
because this season is like it's kind of worse than Ev, because you can get the 311s from all your slots because it's 3 raids worth of gear. So it's like the eye level gap is worse than ever in terms of how far ahead raid is than M plus. On the other hand, the tertiary gap, as you mentioned, the best way to be full tertiaries is from spamming +2s. So it's like
the best
way raiders are looking at these
to purchase BOEs from every single raid.
True, that also works. Yeah. Oh my God, could you imagine?
Yeah, this season is wild.
Like if there was a legitimate Race to World First run under this season, and like imagine the gold prices of of the VOEs and stuff that would be flying around.
Dude, I'm already sitting there scanning the auction house for avoidance pieces right now. Not right now, but like, I bought like an avoidance cloak. It's pretty cheap. By the way, if you're looking for some nice avoidance BOEs, you can get some pretty cheap avoidance 304 cloaks.
Yeah, and you can catalyze
Something
them as
like
well.
150k.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
All right, and then finally a little bit of discussion about class communication that was basically like, yeah, a couple classes haven't been getting too much communication. You know, they understand it'd be helpful to hear, we hear you and we'll have something soon rather than radio silence. But I do think the general point of like maybe these aren't all being progressed equally, and it's like, okay, we'll work on one, then we'll work on the other, then we'll work on like I think that's a fine way to do it. It's just like obviously it feels bad then if at the end of this process there's a class that's been ignored, and so like they need to kind of build up the trust that that's not going to happen. And I think a lot of people in a lot of class discords do not have that trust currently.
I think that like at least Moonkins have kind of been like, we're not that upset yet, but it's like, if it goes another month, it's like, oh, we're not getting anything. And it's just like, okay, wait, this is really bad. And it's like there's some level of like, okay, this is tolerable. And then it's like, and then there's like, then a month and a half after that, and you're like, oh my god, we're actually getting nothing. Wait, what were we supposed to do in retrospect? Were we supposed to complain more on Twitter about this until they actually were forced to act, or like what's the solution?
Yeah, it's like, could Moonkins possibly complain any more on Twitter than they currently do? I mean, we're talking about like a Herculean feat.
I haven't been saying anything. Like I tweet a couple of times, just like where are the changes, like in jest, but it's not like, oh my god, something has to happen like now.
Yeah, I do agree. Ideally, it's like ideally Blizzard communicates a little bit more that like Druid changes. We're taking feedback right now. We have plans to release the next batch of Druid changes in 3 weeks or whatever.
That's all I needed. Like straight up.
I do think that would be good. Because yeah, I don't think they should have to like have a post on every class every week or anything like that. I think doing them in some sort of sequence can be fine, as long as of course they do every class. Which yeah, that's the trust issues. Anyways. We got a couple Q&A questions to get to, but first we get to thank the supporters over on the Patreon. They are Paul. Yes, Ian, please release all the raid difficulties at the same time, including LFR. Who's ready to spell reflect the big slimes in Gunker area and get wrecked by some weeks because the hard mode bot is in the wrong spot? Yeah, the hard mode thing, I think I figured out the rotation in NA now, so like this week you can't go Gunker, and then the next 2 weeks you can, and then the next week you can't, and then the next 2 weeks you can, I think is how it'll work, but not 100% sure.
Is this very important for the Dratnus expert routes?
It's what I've been trying to. I have like the Trixie route and the Gunker route, and I'm trying to figure out which ones to say to use in each region, but it's different in EU and NA. It's a pain.
Makes sense.
Never Nude, Ja, Dratnus' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Chewy, Grimrail Depot. How about you Grimrail D's pose? ZivXX, Salty Zeddy, Necris, Sinmora, Tankdill, Nevuk, Fred Ceratops, Eevee Survival Main, No Trick, I forgot I was sub-tier, Dymat, Lufer, Rework Mistweaver. The morale will continue until the beatings improve. Nyx, DH Tree looking spicy, 2-minute meta haste build, big momentum build, a CC god build. Oh my. Gallic, Brusive, Dratnosauros Abyss. Pink Floyd's The Wall is to old people what the Black Parade is to us. Feel strong, man. Msanity, Xena, Rogue is now good enough for Prog. You are old, Dettles. Rogue is now good enough for Prog, still bad enough to be sat for SLG, bless up. Relevant again this week. Red Color, youtube.com/workbringer, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, #1 Simski for Trellski, It's Not Lurka's Fault, Milk, Pone, Windwalker Monks deal with Nurse by rolling with the punches, Due to Sims with 4-piece, Skelly will be going back to Elemental from Enhance, please finish casting Power Word Update, The Marsh Hare, and please keep Kyrian Arcane in Dragonflight. I heard the mages got some pretty good tweaks to their trees recently as well. I heard they're mostly pretty happy, yeah.
I heard that mages were malding a lot less, which is good.
Yeah.
Very happy for them.
All right, we got only a couple Q&A questions because our show went a little long. Our first one comes from Cardinarch, who asks in Twitch chat, curious if, as a DPS player, you would not use a talent point for an interrupt and tell your group to suck it.
Oh, man. Oh, that's going to be the new mentality that's like instant red flag in my mind. Like, DPS doesn't want to take their interrupt, especially in like a pug situation where they know they're probably going to need it. X.
But Trell, it's 0.8% damage for me to not take my interrupt. Trell.
Or the other side of things where it's like, I need to interrupt this cast because it gives me 15 fury. Well, I need to interrupt it because it gives me 20 runic power. And then it's just like everybody kicks the first cast and then nobody has a kick for the second
Okay,
cast.
that's a good problem to have in the key as a tank player. I see that. I'm like, keep it coming. Keep fighting over the kicks.
Trell, I gotta get this interrupt so I can get 15 seconds off my cooldown.
All right, that one doesn't matter nearly as much unless it's like a very high interrupt dungeon. Just
Well,
saying.
that one is that the reward for interrupting is cooldown reduction on your interrupt. Who cares? There's no damage from either of that side of things, right? That's just a loop of more interrupts. I don't care. All
My damage.
right, next question comes from Prupple, who says, do you guys think one reason why Season 4 feels so fun is literally that the Shadowlands dungeons were just not that good, even in comparison to Docks and Lower?
Halls of Atonement was good.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest. I don't miss a single Shadowlands dungeon. I just did not like them that much. I don't know.
Yeah, Tazavesh would be the only ones that I'd miss, and they're still here. Love Tazavesh. That place is sweet.
I think also it helps that the seasonal affix is pretty good, and we had those Shadowlands dungeons for a really long time.
Encrypted was good
in my
too,
mind,
though.
Halls of Atonement was like actually a pretty good dungeon. So I think
Not for tank players. I don't know. Maybe as a ranged DPS. I think.
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
think
for
one
melee
role
either.
Enjoys Halls of Atonement, and that's ranged DPS.
Well, I don't know if you've played Workshop or Grimrail Depot as a melee, but those are not dungeons that you want to do either.
Yeah, to answer the question, I do think this is definitely part of it, is that the Shadowlands, the pool, it's not necessarily just that they were not that good. I think a part of the Shadowlands dungeons that was rough was that they all felt so similar to each other as well, whereas this season we have kind of a rich tapestry of like linear, non-linear, boss-focused, trash-focused, different types of dungeons that really feel different from each other.
I
Yeah,
think
that's true.
survivability checks in M+ this season. I don't know what it is, but we went so far in the other direction where everything was like a damage check, including like healing, to where we now have like serious survivability checks and the timer's a lot more lenient. For me, I've been liking this a lot more. I think it's been a lot more interesting, just like theory crafting, having to survive these one shots, or like having to survive, like how much avoidance do I need to put on and things like that. Because I think that there was kind of something that was lost with Shadowlands when there was no one shots.
True.
Which unavoidable one shots are cringe, by the way. But the ones that you can play around, not cringe.
Something I noticed about the returning dungeons from Legion is that, like, as a tank player, I have so many more options for defensives now. I think most tank players that's true for now compared to Legion, and that's going to be even better in the next expansion. And so I think the one shots, if you apply that to DPS players as well, is more outplayable now in general. And I think that's a fine mechanic as long as there's counterplay. And also this season, not only did that come back as like a theme, but Mortal Strike is really important this season for the first time ever, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
every season with a DK also feels good. That's just facts.
True.
True. I actually really like playing DK. Don't tell the Brewmaster community, but it was really fun.
Every season with like a DK tank or a Vengeance Demon Hunter tank, those are the best seasons for tanking because like they have so much agency over themselves.
Oh yeah.
Final question comes from Cafe Olay, who says, you guys think another class will get summoning capabilities besides Warlock? Maybe Rogues.
Rogues? Why does Rogue need summoning?
Well, it's like, shadowy, like, they do Shadow Step and stuff. It's like mass Shadow Step.
They're gonna hold on. Come with me. Come with me into the shadows.
I think it should be Paladin. I think Paladin's getting Battle Res, but they should also get Summon, and it should be like that scene in the... Spoilers for Avengers Endgame. It should be like that scene in Avengers Endgame where all the portals are like opening up behind them. It's like, I got all my friends here with me. They should do that. They should have a summon, but it only works. You press it and then you pull the boss, and then everybody gets portaled in, literally on pull on the boss through those portals.
Yeah.
It'd be sweet. So
it should be Death Knight. It should be Death Knight with their Death Gate, unironically.
That'd be cool.
That'd be cool.
I was also thinking before they designed the monk capstone Windwalker statue thing, I was thinking that maybe it would be like mass transcendence. That'd be really cool.
Ooh.
Oh, But instead of like you're actually summoning somebody like the Warlock does with the DK Deathgate, your own Deathgate just like pops up out of the ground at your position. You have to click it, and then you get taken to where they are.
Or everybody in the group has to fly to Acaris, where they can then take a Deathgate to wherever the DK is.
Yeah,
Yeah?
that one sounds great.
Yeah, could be pretty fun. These are just some of the many great ideas that we have here on the show.
I wouldn't. Okay, to be a boar playing, I wouldn't hate another class being able to summon. That's like it's really good for raid. It's obscenely obnoxious if you're doing like a pug and you don't have a warlock in your group to summon people.
Yeah, I do agree. There are cool flavor. Warriors could do it. They could summon one of those beams of light that let people like jump up to Skyhold and then jump back down where the warrior is. You know,
Mages deserve nothing.
yeah. Do not give that to mages. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Anyways,
on that note, that is the end of our podcast for this week. Hope everybody enjoyed. We will be back next week with TGP EU edition discussion and some other topic that we haven't decided yet. So stay tuned for
We will
that.
decide that approximately 2 hours before the next show.
Yes.
I've never done that.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.